This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, this is Dennis Reagan, and I'm the instructor for the CGSI Slovak 1 course. And I wanted to do this brief video just to do a brief overview of the course to show you what I plan to teach and how I plan to teach it. So we'll start with the fact that I use my own course book. I developed this over time, probably over 10 years or so, 10, 12 years. And it's about 70 pages long, and we'll go through about maybe 30 pages of the 70 in the first course. I use the other remaining 30 in the Slovak 2 course that I do as well. So that's my main resource that I use. The other items that I use are typically YouTube videos and also audio files. These are done these are available offline, not in the class itself. I can't show video and I can't play audio in the classes because of bandwidth issues, but I can give you the URL for the videos on YouTube, for example, and I can either send you the audio files or I have them in my Dropbox. They'll be in the Dropbox anyway for you to download and play and practice. So the audio files, for example, are very critical because pronunciation is very important. And I've had most of those audio files done by Slovak friends of mine, and I do some of them myself, but of course Slovaks know their language, pronounce their language a whole lot better than I can. So I've given them my vocabulary pages and have asked them to record them for me, which they do, and then send them to me, and then I make them available to you. So those are now the three main resources I use. The videos, for example, are almost always videos that pertain to what we are learning in the course. So we'll make those available to you as well. So regarding the topics, I'm going to move into this pretty quickly. We cover we provide a brief introduction into Slovakia, the country and the language and its traditions very briefly in the beginning, but then I touch upon the traditions and culture throughout the course. We do a course overview in that first class, which basically I'm doing now, but I'll do a little more thorough job of that in the first class. Next, we talk about English grammar. And you may say, well, why are we learning or talking about English grammar when we're learning Slovak? And it's because that knowing your own grammar is really important to be able to learn another language's grammar. And that is very true in the case of Slovak because the words change a lot in Slovak based on the grammar. So the a word used in the nominative case is going to be different than in most cases than it is in the objective case, sometimes called the accusative case in English. So those, by the way, those two cases I just mentioned, the nominative and the objective, are the two cases that we'll cover in Slovak. There are a total of 6 cases in Slovak. We will address 2 in the first course. If you happen to continue with Slovak 2, then we cover another 2. Okay, so um, that's why grammar is important, and I will provide this particular page to those of you who register for the course ahead of time, so that you'll have a chance to look at that before, before the course begins. Then I talk about Slovak language generalities, little things like that. Slovak uses the Latin alphabet versus the Cyrillic, like many of the other Slavic languages. We talk about the fact that there are 6 cases in Slovak when English has 3. We talk about the fact that Slovak doesn't use articles like and the, like we do in English. Little things like that, just to give you an idea of the language. Next, we'll introduce the alphabet, which is critical, as you can imagine. It's important to know the alphabet because that's the basis, the foundation for how you pronounce words in Slovak. And you probably all have experienced a situation where you've been listening to somebody speak English who doesn't pronounce very well, and it makes it pretty hard to understand sometimes. So same thing goes for we as Americans or Canadians being able to pronounce Slovak well or well enough to be understood. Okay, so we'll do that. And I have the audio files, quite a few of those for you to access and use to learn how to pronounce, to review and practice. The next thing I do, or one of the next things I do, is to show you some of the vocabulary that's very will look familiar to you in Slovak. These are words, for example, like muzeum, which is the word for museum. So you can figure that out. There are many like that. Some are exactly like they are in English. Some are very close. I always like the one for mathematics, and it's matematika. Matematika. I'm sorry. I always put that accent on the first syllable in Slovak. Matematika. And you'll see bicycle for bicycle and banan for banana. So there are a number of words, and I think there are more and more English words being brought into Slovak than ever before. So we'll cover some of those on this particular page in this section in the course book if you take the course. There are probably 20 times more words than I show on this one page that you can learn if you have the chance or time to do it. Okay, and so moving on to the next page, we'll start with vocabulary regarding family and relatives. So, and I also have pets in there as well. So this is important, and we'll learn how to pronounce this. We'll learn how to try to make the connection between the words in English and Slovak so that you can remember the Slovak, and we'll move on from there into adjectives. So you can imagine when you think about the different types of words, you've got nouns, you have adjectives, you have adverbs, you have verbs. Uh, I'm sure I missed something, but these are the different areas of vocabulary that we're going to try to learn. So this is the page showing the first page on some adjectives that we cover. There are several additional pages on all of these uh, throughout the course book in regard to vocabulary. Then another area that I put some emphasis on is what I call Slovak expressions. So there are some things that you just have to learn. Um, some of them are just one word, but some of them are two words or more. Some you would use in some situations, some you would not use. So you've probably heard words like ahoy and ciao and dobry dzień. So we'll talk about those and we'll learn those. And I have 2 pages in the very beginning on common Slovak expressions, but there are more throughout the book, throughout the course book. Next, we'll get into the first verb that we want to encounter in Slovak, and that's the verb být. And být is the verb that means to be. It's the most commonly verb used in Slovak, just as to be is the most commonly verb used in English. So we'll talk about that, and it's the perfect word to introduce the nominative case in Slovak. So it goes hand in hand with the Slovak nominative case, just as to be in English goes hand in hand with the nominative case in English. And then there are some other areas we'll talk about, learn Slovak words for different types of food. And we'll also address various areas that cover maybe more than just nouns or adjectives. A good example of that is the whole concept of time. We'll talk about nouns that pertain to time and about adverbs and phrases that pertain to time, and we'll learn those as well. And we'll have, for all of these vocabulary areas, you will have audio files to use to practice with. Okay, some of the other areas, another one on people, kind of an extension of family and relatives. Again, this is all in the beginning of the book. We'll talk about professions and how there's usually a female version of the male version. So you have učitel as the male teacher, but you have učitelka as the word for female teacher. So that pertains to many professional words or words for professions in Slovak. And of course, there are other areas such as numbers that we'll cover as well. And then eventually we'll get to the accusative case. Now, in this little overview I'm doing now, I jumped around. I just chose different pages throughout the 70-page course book just to give you an idea. But I wanted you to see just some examples of the areas that we're going to cover. So the accusative case, which is usually called objective, I think anymore, we will introduce that toward the end of the course, probably around the seventh class, if I remember correctly, is when we do that. So we'll talk about how it's used in English and then convey that over to how it's used in Slovak. So I didn't want to go too long here and just give you some idea of how the course will be run and what we cover and the materials that we use. I hope you sign up for it if you haven't already. And so maybe we'll see you soon.